Wow, alrighty. So the Scorpio content on this channel has turned out to be pretty popular, which is cool. Love seeing Scorpios from all over, everywhere, climbing out from under their rocks and hanging out, dropping some comments, finding things that they resonate with, and finding that it's emotionally meaningful. I love to see that. So I'm gonna keep putting out Scorpio content. Don't worry, this isn't gonna be a Scorpio hostile takeover of the channel. There's still gonna be a lot of variety of great, or like, great, maybe great, average content. I don't know, gotta stay humble. This is another Scorpio video though, and we're talking about the core fears of a Scorpio, what those fears are made out of, and core experiences or rites of passage that are part of the journey of transforming those fears into superpowers. So let's get into it. Now, all the zodiac signs have their core fear. For the water signs, these tend to be more emotionally rooted fears. It's a fear of loneliness, of abandonment. Sometimes it's also a fear of mundane existence, of bureaucracy, of being stuck. The Trial by Kafka, just stuck in endless, meaningless, recursive bureaucratic process that has no purpose. And Scorpio has these fears for sure. Scorpio can sustain themselves and be very self-reliant, independent. They do have a deep need and yearning for intimate connection, meaningful connection. In the short term, it's fine if that's not there, but long term, never experiencing that, never having that. That's a fear for Scorpio. One of the things that makes Scorpio unique amongst the other water signs is that the way that they choose to direct or orient their intuitive powers, their sensing, emotional intelligence type of powers is they direct it like a freaking laser beam at the core of everything, the core of people, like their shadow, their subconscious, the things that they conceal and keep under the hood. Scorpios shoot like a laser beam to their experiences. They want to get to the heart, that intense core, the peanut butter center of the Reese's peanut butter cup, like the very middle. That's what makes Scorpios, and you love them for that. Or you think they're completely over the top, hyper intense psychopaths that are surprisingly sensitive and whiny for how strong and powerful they claim to be. Gotta roast Scorpios a little bit here and there. What's ironic is that Scorpio drive to want to look under the hood, of wanting to pull the stove out from the wall and see all the dust and food crumbs that have been collecting underneath for way too long. It exposes them to things that are going to be gnarly and scary and triggering sometimes. The normal experience of being a human is figuring out how to modulate all the traffic going around in the subconscious, right? In the inner thoughts and monologues. And there is uncomfortable stuff. There's negative thoughts, there's fears, there's a shadow, there's flaws. We as humans have to figure out how to integrate that in what we express socially or publicly or to an intimate partner, and what we keep in the Tupperware. But Scorpio's like, no, don't freaking move. Open the Tupperware. I want the cookies. I want what's in there. I want to see it all. I want to go under the hood. And that ability, and people either love it or they hate it in Scorpios, regardless of that ability is what allows them to create these deep transformational bonds with people. But it requires them to look at stuff that's not pretty. It's the gunk under the stove. It's the leftovers that's been in the Tupperware too long that's molding. That stuff is all normal to exist in a person. We all kind of have those dark, shadowy parts of ourselves. Not everyone has such an obsession with having to actually look at it. And so it's this kind of catch-22 where Scorpio forges these very deep bonds with intimate others, but you have to know what you're doing. This requires maturity on the part of a Scorpio. It requires wisdom, a little bit of a comfort, and an ability to put things in context. Scorpios are driven to connect deeply because they experience deep meaning and they experience deep personal growth as a result of those relationships. But sometimes it's also hard to separate out the fear-motivated aspects of that, where Scorpio doesn't so much always fear being abandoned or being lonely as much as they fear building this soul bond with someone where they expect that it's going to be static and it's going to remain forever, and feelings are never going to change. Love is never going to go away. While knowing, right, that's not necessarily the nature of the world. That's not the nature of people. Everything is impermanent. Everything is changing. And while Scorpios are very comfortable penetrating to the core in their relationships, sometimes it can also become a means of making Scorpios think they have control over situations, of making them think they can possess people. If they know someone well enough or they understand them deeply enough, they can prevent or reduce risk of unexpected things happening, of rejection, of things going awry. The problem is when you get in so deep with another person, you're inevitably going to brush up against their flaws and their shadow, and no one is really perfect. And Scorpios can get caught up in reacting to that stuff where they expect there to be perfection and purity and strength, or what they define as strength. And when they sense weakness or flaws or anything that gives them an opportunity to feel paranoid or insecure, or like a person might be a flight risk. And speaking mainly for a more immature or younger Scorpio, it's hard not to react to those things. And that's why when Scorpios are pulling out the oven from the wall, metaphorically, they do need a solid dose of, you can do this, but I hope you know what you're doing. Are you sure you want to go that deep? Are you sure you want to look? The difference between an immature, unevolved Scorpio and a more mature one is when they pull out that oven and they see a dead mouse or a rat run out. The younger Scorpio is like, deuces, screw this, I'm out, I never want to see you again, casts off the person, sees their one deep dark flaw or their shadow or something that like gives them some reason to fear, whatever, like they're out. Whereas the mature Scorpio is, yes, this is like the catch-22 of going in deeply, and I have to know that not everything is going to be perfect and there are no guarantees, and I'm developing this bond with a person, but there's no guarantees. I can't control it. I can't possess it. I'm gonna try to clean up the crap under the stove, clean up the mouse, get rid of the mice, but we'll see how successful that is. Is this getting a little bit, this might be getting like a way too abstract, and I'm sorry if it is. Scorpios are never going to not want to seek out these intense experiences, find intensity in the things they choose to do, find that intensity in their relationships, but it's really important over time for a Scorpio to approach that laser beam intensity and focus on things with a calmer approach of observing and just being present, rather than an obsessive approach of having to dissect and audit everything, put it in a risk framework, trying to predict and control the unknown future. And so you see a defense mechanism for Scorpios as one, staying hidden under a rock, not engaging their intensity, not seeking out those relationships or experiences because they don't want to get hurt. Or you also see the defense mechanism of Scorpios kind of going part way or getting close until they look under the hood and see the not so great stuff. And then before they even take a deep breath, they're just sprinting out the door, running away, either just passively running away or, it's a fight or flight. Sometimes they get aggressive and they'll blame it on you. And again, it's a way for them to create a defense against rejection, humiliation, a feeling of being left at the altar where they've given themselves, where they've given a piece of their soul and it's not met and they're left with their insides hanging out. It's very painful and scary for them. Sometimes it's on a very raw level. It's a point where Scorpio has to be confronted with the limits of their own power. Scorpio is an incredibly intense, powerful sign. All Scorpios have that somewhere, but no matter how powerful it is, Scorpio is never going to be able to control its environment, control other things outside of itself in ways that make the future predictable. And so intellectually they know they can't control things, but emotionally, it's like they still want to. And that creates a lot of tension and activity and fear and anger and just emotional agitation. So the core fear is, again, it's not necessarily abandonment. It's not necessarily loneliness, but it is being exposed to something that they fear very much, not being able to control things, being rejected, having feelings that are unrequited, and without that armor, right? Without the protective defenses. And when Scorpio is all in and they're really locked in and they're vulnerable and they're putting everything on the table, they are taking off their armor, they're taking off their stinger, their claws for a second, and it's terrifying for a Scorpio. And for the younger Scorpios, the unevolved Scorpios that haven't gone through this process yet, they tend to avoid that situation entirely. Like they never want to even have a moment where they're even standing without armor. And so there is reactivity, proactive reactivity. So anticipatory reactions to things that they perceive, like vacillations in another person's emotions, like little inconsistencies in what they're being told, anything that just seems off, right? And Scorpio can intuit that something is wrong. Sometimes they are very accurate. They do have a strong intuition. Sometimes it's being driven from an unevolved place, like that intuition can balloon into more of a last really true narrative and it gets out of control. And when it's driven by paranoia, then it's not as really reliable. And this is often why Scorpios do get a bad rap, because in those moments where the fears, the paranoias, the recognition of a lack of control that seems threatening, it balloons and they go on the attack and they will react in intense, out-of-pocket ways that objectively are like, what the frick, that's out of control. But Scorpios know that often is proportional to the degree and intensity of pain that they feel or they anticipate feeling. And so the acting out and the bullshit is objectively bullshit. I'm not excusing it, but that's a key why sometimes that behavior is hard to understand, because people don't truly appreciate just how intense the pain that Scorpio is feeling, or intense that pain that they are worried about experiencing. All of this, the TLDR is this really interesting kind of life riddle or koan for Scorpios, where what they need and crave most, this deep penetrating experience and soul merging bond with people in their life, is at the same time what they most need and also what most agitates and triggers their deepest fears, which is like, yeah, sick, like, wow, what a cool placement to have, because that makes sense, right? It's like, yes, I want this, but wait, do I? Yes, no. Wait, yes, no. Yes, but maybe just I'll dip a toe in a little bit, but like if things get bad, I'll book. It's tough, right? And while not every Scorpio maybe can relate to what I've been describing, a lot of Scorpios do. And even if they're not in this process or in the thick of it, it's a general Scorpionic experience, a general Scorpionic rites of passage to figure out how to integrate these seeming inconsistencies and find ways to address and conquer the fears so that they are still opening themselves up ultimately to things that are going to nourish their soul and that they really need, right, to feel truly alive. And there's always going to be a thumb on getting what you need part, the soul fulfilling part, even though it's scary and terrifying, because they follow the logical next steps, right? They find themselves in situations where they're in complete control, things are consistent, and that's what Scorpio wanted, right? But, live in that world for a little bit and Scorpio is going to go crazy. There's no change, there's nothing, and they will ironically impose self-created chaos, self-created sabotage or agitation in order to cause total upheaval, to again scratch that Scorpionic itch for deep transformational meaning. And so they're simultaneously scared of it, but subconsciously they're always going to crave it. Scorpios get obsessed about the things that they think they desire. There's this really poignant quote about Scorpios that stuck with me by astrologer Isabel Hickey. I think it was either Scorpio Sun or Scorpio Moon. She says Scorpios live a life where they're just obsessive and want to get what they desire at all costs. And they do everything they can. And like 99% of the time, they get what they want. They get precisely what they want. And then they get it and they realize, yeah, I don't really even want that so much. Like, I don't even really want or need this. That's kind of the irony of it. So keep in mind, Scorpios that are going through this, while it is scary to be open and vulnerable and to expose yourself to pain and heartbreak and loss and grief, ultimately, it's the best way. It's really the only way to really receive and modulate and truly experience the gifts and blessings of a Scorpio life, a Scorpio experience. And so I would say there's maybe 4 big life experiences that will initiate this process of turning these fears into superpowers, of transforming a fear of the unknown, a fear of being vulnerable, into a quiet confidence in self-reliance and recognition and belief in one's own inner power. So the first one, right, is Scorpio's first experience of true ultimate heartbreak. Maybe this is the ending of the first love that Scorpio has experienced, and especially heartbreak that is born out of them being broken up with, of rejection, not something that they initiated preemptively, something that caught them off guard. Everyone's experience of this is going to be unique, but this is like a poignant, very painful, but very significant moment and rites of passage for a Scorpio. It's intense, it sucks. They're gonna be not in a great spot for a while, assuming they had very strong feelings for the ex-partner, but once they get on the other side of it, they'll realize, okay, this was the worst case scenario. Maybe not the worst, you can always think of like way worse, but this was like not ideal when I thought about the future of this relationship. But I got through this, I am stronger for it, I'm thriving now. It helps Scorpio stand more fearlessly in those uncomfortable and scary spots in future relationships. And I think it's something that you can't totally do until you've been and experienced the worst part of it. And you've gone through those trials and tribulations and come out. And then it still sucks. You still don't want it, but you're a little bit more calm about the possibility that it could happen. Number 2 is experiencing the loss, the death of a loved one, a family member, a parent, going through an intense grief process. A breakup, heartbreak, that's also a grief process, but this is certainly a different kind of grief process. Scorpio is faced with this finality, right, and this mortality at the highest emotional level, the most intense level. This is some of the most poignant emotional pain that humans will experience. And as a Scorpio goes through it, and it will be messy and it will be jagged, they do end up connecting with the more spiritual, soulful parts of themselves. Being so close to mortality, loss, impermanence is like shitty. It sucks, it's a part of being human. It sucks, but it leaves Scorpio giving and feeling more meaning from their experience. It helps them be more intentional with their time and where they're investing their energy. It also helps them expand their conception of love as something that's material or tangible or possessive, or something that you can hug or call or text, to something that's more universal, something more spiritual, something less tangible, but more poignant, more permanent, more enveloping on the inside and the heart and the soul. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, Scorpio, go experience some like horrible, tragic shit, have people, go through grief, get broken up with, right? You're not seeking these things out. But guys, newsflash, if you are going through life, you're going to experience these moments of pain. Everyone is going to. And to the extent that we don't talk about these things generally, or we pretend that everyone's supposed to be happy all the time, we do ourselves a disservice, because pain and suffering, it's this other side of the same coin. It's giving and experiencing meaning from this life. And instead of ignoring it and repressing it and letting unresolved feelings fester inside you as you continue to kind of recreate the same complexes, thinking about it meaningfully, thoughtfully, and thinking about how these experiences can serve as energetic and emotional nudges to transform or take that next step or put yourself outside your comfort zone in a way that is going to ultimately, again, help you evolve. The number 3 thing is Scorpio accomplishing some really difficult long-term goal or task that they previously thought was impossible according to their inherited set of limitations or beliefs in themselves. Scorpio is so drawn to that immediate cross-section of an intensity, immediate to the core of experience, right? And they want it to happen right now. It's, Scorpios are very all or nothing. They don't like having to wait and buy their time and warm things up and go through small talk. It's just right now, let's go to the core. This has got to be something that, it's not just going to happen. Unlike the first 2 things, this is an experience that is completely directed and intended by the Scorpio. And you can think about really arduous physical goals like running an ultra marathon, something you can't just do tomorrow, something that is a product of you continuing to challenge and believe in yourself day to day, of taking that kind of atomic habits type approach of, getting 1% better every day and letting the results take care of themselves. It could be a very concerted intention to get out of an unfavorable set of current circumstances, like getting out of student loan debt or debt that requires a lot of creativity and very intense focus. It could be a side hustle goal, a creative goal, anything, right? The point of this one is really a process of Scorpio revealing to themselves just how incredibly powerful they are, of realizing that the limits that they're constantly looking at, the outer bounds, are often self-created and they're often overly conservative. And once Scorpio sees their ability to kind of continue to forge precious metal out of the fire of determination and commitment and struggle on a day-to-day basis, and they see the fruits of that labor way down the road, reflecting back, it's a life-changing moment, right? Because Scorpio suddenly doesn't look at limits and boundaries with the same perspective anymore. They know and they become very confident in the fact that they can do and direct that intensity. They can direct that intensity and that power in whatever way they want. And it's truly remarkable, the moment when Scorpio really discovers that and really integrates that and really believes it. Through all of these experiences, when Scorpio experiences suffering and impermanence and loss, and they're confronted with the very things that they fear, and they come out of it stronger, in a new skin, more powerful, more loving, more grateful. All of that helps loosen this grip that Scorpios are sometimes so determined to apply to everything. Instead of approaching everything, every experience in their life with this need to modulate and control and manage risk and predict what bad shit is going to happen before it happens, Scorpio comes from a place of wanting to share the gifts of their intensity, of their experience. I think about Scorpio's symbolic association with a raven, or this concept of a psychopomp, which travels between different dimensions. It is a messenger between different dimensions, between inner and outer, conscious and subconscious, life and death, the normal world and the underworld. Scorpio can give and share what they've learned and communicate it. And Scorpio can be the type of person that when another person finds out that their parent was diagnosed with cancer, or is scared, or is in the thick of those kind of dark, scary, but very universal human experiences, Scorpio is there and can share and can apply that laser beam focus to heal and be comforting and to give love without the expectation of controlling anything or receiving anything. Scorpio isn't so concerned about what could potentially happen because it knows it's been through the storm and it's come out of it. And that instills a calmness, quiet confidence, and a more, again, heart and love-driven approach than a kind of tense fear, fight or flight type approach. Scorpios don't worry about having draw the short straw, or losing in the game of chicken, or being the one that miscalculates and lays everything on the line and then gets hung out to dry, or has to see all their insides left out and exposed because the other person shut them down or put up walls. It's all okay, because that expression for Scorpio isn't something that takes them or alienates them away from themselves. It's just a further authentic expression. And they reframe this idea of strength and power from being one where someone has the upper hand, the person that cares less, the person that's less vulnerable, to, the most strength and the most power being the person that is willing to give the most and to stand on their own 2 feet and to ultimately be completely fine with whatever happens. Being present in that scary spot of the unknown doesn't mean that it always stops being scary. Sometimes it still is. It's still uncomfortable. It's still terrifying. But a Scorpio, having gone through these rites of passage, also knows that spot is where all the treasure is, where all the gold is. That's where the flint, the fire starts. These spontaneous, most meaningful moments of life are initiated when people are vulnerably putting themselves in this space of the unknown. Being here, this is the gate to all meaningful experience in life, and especially experience with others. Staying planted and steadfast, authentically being in that space, ready to give and to receive everything that life has to offer. It's awesome. Doesn't that sound awesome? Come on.